Okay, so double strokes, also, one of the most important rudiments, absolutely. If you're gonna like ever get into marching or like DCI, it's like maybe the most important rudiment in that type of playing. But you can maybe guess what double stroke roll is based on what single stroke roll is. So with single strokes, we're playing one note per hand. Double strokes, that just means we're playing two notes per hand. So, slowly like this. Right, right, left, left. Or of course, like our single strokes, we can reverse and start on our left hand. Left, left, right, right. Now, mechanically, these are a little more involved to get used to than single strokes. There are basically three sort of typical ways to play double strokes. The first one is the most obvious, which is just that each note is an individual strike, even though you're playing two notes at a time. So all of those notes I'm reactivating with my wrist. So I'm playing twice with each wrist. And you could do that with your arm. You could do that with your fingers. But I'm activating each note as its own kind of event, right? Like this. So that is going to give you the most control, but it's going to be the hardest to play fast just because it involves the muscles the most. So there's kind of a spectrum where as you get faster and kind of sacrifice like the larger muscle groups, it's harder. It takes more practice really to control to the same degree. So for our second way, so that's kind of like our slowest, most controlled way, is this. Our second way, which is kind of the middle speed, the middle amount of control, is to play the first note with our wrist and then the second note by closing our fingers. So like this. Hopefully you can see that. So like in slow motion, just so you can see really clearly, I'm going to play the first note, the stick's going to come back, and then I'm going to close my fingers, my back fingers, like this. Yeah. So that's kind of in the middle. So that's going to give us, once you get used to it, a little more speed, but a little less control than you get with your wrists. And then finally, our third way is basically just using the bounce for the second note. So like this. So I'm not directly activating the second note with any group of muscle in my arms or hands or fingers. Basically, I'm allowing the stick to rebound, and I'm controlling the speed and velocity of the second note by the shape of my hand and the tension throughout my arm. And that takes a really long time to get used to. You're not going to be able to just do anything like that at first. So you just really have to take your time, and I would recommend practicing with one hand at a time like that. But that's going to allow you to play the fastest, but it's going to be the hardest to control because you're basically allowing the response of the stick and the drum, or pad in this case, to play that second note for you. You only have input over the second note, how it happens. You don't actually play the second note directly. So it takes a really long time to get used to that, but it's going to allow you to play much faster, and eventually you do get pretty good at controlling it if you put enough time in. So those are our basic three ways. They're all useful. I would say to focus on the ones on the edge first, like playing with your full motions and playing with the bounce, because actually there's advantages and disadvantages to this, but you can work the wrist one fast enough and the bounce one slow enough that they kind of meet in the middle, and you can kind of skip over the finger one. That's what I actually do most of the time, personally. That's not to say that the finger one isn't useful or worth practicing also. I would just say that it's not as essential to having clean double strokes at a wide range of tempos as the other two. So anyway, you know, you want to practice those at different speeds. Also, you want to maybe figure out where your cutoff speeds are. Like, so maybe around, 130 BPM 16th notes, you start to move from activating every note to using your fingers, or maybe to rebounding the note, so bouncing the second note. So that's really good to investigate, and that's why people will tell you to practice slow to fast also. So like, starting like this and then gradually accelerating until eventually you're playing fast like this and you go back down, because that way you can really start to work on the details of when that transition happens, how it happens, and how you manipulate your hand in order to facilitate that switch. And really it's something that it's very subtle, so it's hard to actually explain like what changes in my hand when I played double strokes at 170 BPM versus 180. It's such a minute difference that really at a certain point the only way to learn it is to try to do it and just make sure you're not, not hurting yourself and not pushing yourself too far in terms of what your current abilities are. So, on top of that, an exercise that I give a lot of my students that I think is really helpful is this exercise that gradually becomes 16th notes. It starts as 8th note single strokes, and then eventually it becomes 16th note double strokes. And it does that one step at a time, and it's really good for developing your endurance, your clarity, I think, and especially your evenness, because I'll find with a lot of people when they're learning how to play double strokes, they might be good for a short period of time like that, and then it will kind of get compromised in quality, so it might sound kind of like something like this, right? And so what this does is, because this exercise is gradually building a double stroke roll from a single stroke roll at half that speed, it really allows you to focus on each individual double stroke and make sure that they're even as they get longer and longer. So the way it works is you basically play 8th notes, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and like that, single strokes. And I usually do it with a timer, and I do 1 minute of each of these patterns. So I would play 1 minute of that. And when a minute passes, I'm going to make that first 8th note of each measure a double stroke. That's 2 16th notes. So if I'm leading with my right hand, that's going to be my right hand. So that would go like this. I'm going to do that for a minute, and then I'm going to add the second 8th note, the and of 1, with my left hand, make that a double stroke too. And I'm going to do that all the way until I'm playing just straight 16th notes like that. So I'll just play like 2 measures of each pattern just so you can get an idea of the sound of each one. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I promise if you do that exercise every day with a metronome, the whole 9 minutes at a tempo that makes sense for your level, if you do that for a month, I promise there's no way your double strokes won't get better.